like, oh, I'm getting a new toaster for Christmas. I'm so stoked. Instead of
anyway. That's where we keep the toasters right there.
Great. Oh, anyway, on that note, we're live on YouTube. And in addition to talking about the fun of very, grown-up things we want for Christmas, we're going to talk about standards as part of the OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group meeting. We've got a nice agenda for today. We've got a wonderful group of people, as we always do. And we start with our announcements for the week. Any announcements from this group, project announcements, follow-ups from standards meetings you recently attended, upcoming things we should be bearing in mind if you're speaking somewhere, if project has a talk somewhere, anything like that that you all would like to share before I give you my usual long list of stuff.
I think I'm speaking at JS Poland sometime soon, and I think it's going to be about like open governance and the OpenJS Foundation, so that's kind of cool. And then project related, I don't know if you all know, but like Node.js has had a bunch of releases lately. Version 17 is now current, 16 is LTS, and I think, is that it? Yeah. The 12 go, no, I think that's in April. Anyway, bunch of releases and stuff.
TPAC was last week. There's a lot of things. Most of the recordings are actually available online if you want to check any of those out. I spoke recently at AdBlock Dev Summit about Has, which is a pseudo class that was provided by jQuery all the way back 100 years ago. And jQuery Foundation before was like active in trying to get it into CSS finally. And it is actually being worked on. So I think that's kind of a cool thing.
I think that's a very cool thing. And speaking of jQuery and cool in the same sentence, it's definitely experiencing this moment of being retro cool. Go check out, if you haven't seen it, the article on the new stack about the jQuery project and a lot of the infrastructure work that our colleagues here at OpenJS Foundation have been doing to revamp its infrastructure. And, not to throw shade at any other project or anything, but it's, still widely used. So we're still maintaining it and taking really good care of it. And so it's a great piece. So, yeah, that's a good note.
Could you share the link, Jordan?
I sure could share the link. Let me go get it. Let's see. And while I pull that up.
While you pull that, I'll give a quick update. Jordan Harband and I and Todd Moore and some others are at the Linux Foundation Member Summit. All of the keynotes are being streamed, so check them out now or later. Today, Jim Zemlin announced a new tool that makes it easier to have sort of a dashboard into what your company is doing with a variety of projects at the Linux Foundation, of which there are 750 open source projects under the umbrella. So pretty cool. Check it out, and I'll provide some more information in Slack for y'all as well.
Speaking of the member summit, so yesterday we try to take advantage of the member summit as an opportunity for the OpenJS Foundation board to have one in-person meeting, which they did-ish, because we're still in a hybrid world post pandemic. So yesterday that board meeting went pretty long. We're rescheduling the public session as a result. So just keep your eyes peeled for a new invite on the public calendar for the public board meeting, hopefully sometime early next week. So apologies for that, but we will have it rescheduled. Let's see. The other thing we typically have is the programming committee meeting that this week. That's likely canceled because of folks being out at Member Summit. And if you want to get involved with programming for OpenJS World, that calendar invite is on the public calendar as well. And we'd love to have folks there. Any excitement from the TC39 meeting last week to report? I'm assuming Jordan's not here. I know he was there. Richard, I'm assuming you had some stuff you presented. So.
Yeah, so.
Okay. So that was last week. Go check out the agenda if you're curious what they covered. And I think that's it. I think that's it for announcements. Is that it for announcements right now? Robin, do you think?
I think so.
Cool. All right. We can dive into our agenda. And so with that, I want to welcome Jonathan Lips from Appium for an issue that he opened on our repo. Jonathan, would you like to kind of provide some context and kick off this discussion?
Yes. In fact, I made a presentation to hide behind with the whole context slide, so I'll just go ahead and bring that up momentarily. Sweet. Now I don't have to look at my face. There we go. Can someone confirm that we can see the slides here? Awesome. Yep. Cool. So, yeah, I did not know this group existed until recently. So I am relatively context free myself in terms of the larger picture of this group. But from what I understand from Robin and others, it seems like an awesome new wing of the foundation. So really excited to talk to you all and anyone else who's kind of listening in now or later. The basic topic I wanted to bring up is something I've been thinking about for a long time, which is the possibility of a standard for UI automation, by which I mean tooling that allows you to write code to manipulate the user interface of an application the same way that a user would. This is popularized with tools like Selenium for web, or a variety of what's now known as RPA tools for other platforms. And the context here is that Appium has been working on helping solve this problem for users for a long time. It was an OpenJS project. Before that, it was in the JS Foundation. It started like 9 years ago when I was working at Sauce Labs. And the point of Appium, if you haven't ever heard of it before yourself, is to provide basically a Selenium WebDriver compatible interface for platforms other than desktop web browsers, which was the target, kind of the goal of the Selenium project, was to provide automation capabilities for web browsers. But they didn't really want to do anything beyond that. So the Appium project basically started as a hypothesis that of all the kinds of automation protocols we could use to support automation on a variety of platforms, why not just use one that already exists? Hopefully that is a decision that is agreeable to a standards committee. I think, use of standards, and the fewer standards and the more effort there is around existing standards and extending existing standards, I think is obviously a good thing. Appium is pretty popular among especially QA engineers, people whose job is to write test code to test applications who may not be the same people that develop the applications. And so I'm here talking to you all because I'm looking for some feedback, ideas, help on what maybe the next step should be for this proposal that UI automation should be a standard for more than just the desktop web. So ultimately, I've been working on kind of an argument that I'm going to, share with you, not because I think you're really the people that ultimately need to be convinced, but because I'm looking for help in, what to do with this argument. But ultimately, I'm hoping that the platform vendors, so folks that own application platforms, so the Apples and Googles and Microsofts of the world, will buy into this argument and hopefully decide to create their own implementations of a standard that we can all then use moving forward. So that is the context. Hopefully that is clear. So then the kind of part of the argument that I think I hopefully don't need to make to this group, but probably would need to make to other audiences are kind of the basic facts, like the fact that good quality applications are better than poor quality applications, and that automated testing of applications actually helps to improve app quality, and that we should have well-designed tools that enable these types of automated testing practices and continuous integration and stuff like this. The part that I would want to hopefully make clear to platform vendors is that in the same way that they're invested in developer experience on their platform, they should also be invested in the tester experience on their platform, to the extent that development and testing are, all parts of the same software development cycle that result in applications which can be either, good or bad, and will either make their platforms more money or not, right? So I think it's a pretty straightforward argument that when it comes to application quality, testing tools are just as important as kind of developer experience and other things that the platform vendors create to try and get people to lock themselves into building apps on their platforms. So the kind of next step of the argument is that specifically, I think platform vendors should invest in UI automation tools and building them. Of course, they should invest in all kinds of tools. This is just kind of digging a little deeper into that broader argument, trying to say that UI automation is a useful type of technology that platform vendors should create. And in fact, they already do this. So I think this is an argument that they already buy into. If we are just talking about mobile, which is kind of the most popular mode of usage for Appium, Apple, promotes their XCUI test technology for iOS applications, and Google has several technologies. UI Automator is an older one, Espresso is a newer one, and these are, within the category of UI automation technologies that I'm talking about. So they already hopefully believe this, but I think it's worth pointing out that UI automation is a good idea, not to be used as the only type of automation in a CI pipeline or whatever, but as one aspect of it, because it is automation of the same thing that the user is actually doing. So you get a sort of end-to-end view of what's going on with an application, and that really helps in application quality assurance, and it can help to provide data for other kinds of testing, like performance testing or accessibility testing or things like this. So then the next step of the argument is to say that, well, platform vendors, it would actually be beneficial for everybody, including you, if there were a standard UI automation protocol that you built these UI automation technologies against. Thinking again from the perspective of a platform vendor whose incentives are often aligned with users, but in some ways potentially not aligned with users. Like, we could argue that platform lock-in of whatever kind is disadvantageous to the user, whereas very advantageous to the vendor. So whereas both vendors and users incentives are aligned when it comes to application quality, for example, or let's say the number of applications available on a platform. You know, vendors want there to be a lot of high quality apps on their platforms, and so do users. That's good for everybody. But vendors would probably, from a business competition perspective, prefer for all of the users in the world to only use apps on their platforms and not their competitors. So I think this has led to, you know, different kinds of what we call lock-in, right, across the technology stacks that the vendors provide. So kind of, again, with that problem framed, which isn't a relevant problem for this group per se, but more for the platform vendors, I think we could argue that there is definitely room for standards-based technologies all around, maybe let's say more the periphery of their tooling, so it's a little less scary to think about. So a UI automation tool, you know, following a standard, I would argue is, you know, actually provides more benefits for a platform vendor than, you know, keeping that tool as an element of their developer lock-in strategy or something like that. So I have some arguments as to why I think that would be the case, that I think I probably don't need to make here, but would welcome any feedback on how to make these arguments stronger from people who, you know, promote standards to competing vendors in different contexts. So I think, having worked on the Appium project for, you know, 9 years now, that I think Appium is actually a good candidate for a starting draft of what that UI automation standard could be. The biggest reason is that it actually is already standards based. So, you know, the primary work here is being done by the W3C WebDriver standard, which already exists. Appium decided to simply extend that existing protocol. And we have done a fair amount of work to extend it such that it is now, you know, quite a broader protocol. And some of the extensions, I think, are a bit chaotic and could stand to be tightened up. And that's one of the benefits of actually engaging in a standards process around it. All that to say, the core of Appium is already an existing standard. So I think it's a kind of easy sell from a standards perspective to say, like, we have this thing, it's working on the web. Why don't we simply extend that to other platforms? And look, Appium has already sort of developed a proof of concept over the last 9 years of how we can do this. And so there's a lot of wisdom that's already been gained and decisions that have been made that we can leverage. The other reason is that because Appium is pretty popular, it's already kind of a de facto standard. Like, there's not another tool which is cross-platform, which is open source, and all of these things that Appium is that are, you know, anywhere near as popular as Appium. In fact, Appium, I believe, is quite a bit more popular than the natively provided platform tools. I don't have a lot of data to support that. I do have this, you know, fun graph of, you know, Google Trends kind of interest in Appium, where you can see that despite a dip recently, which I'm assuming that this is just going to keep going back up. So that without evidence, of course, but anyway, you can see that regardless, like, Appium as a search term is, you know, in order of magnitude more popular than the native tools from Apple and Google, for example. So again, that would need to be much more rigorously researched, and we'd have to get data from a variety of places to actually determine anything like usage. We don't track, you know, usage being an open source project without any kind of telemetry or things like that. But I think that the reason Appium is popular is that it does unlock certain use cases that the vendor provided tools don't. You can write your Appium test scripts in any language because Appium is based around the WebDriver client server model. And that enables whole teams of people to do the job of UI automation that wouldn't be able to in many cases. A lot of UI automation engineers, software developers and tests, whatever the role is called, they might just know one programming language. They might have learned it specifically for the purpose of testing. They might not be comfortable in Objective-C or Swift or whatever it is. And these teams of testers, they have their own needs, and they're often actually already experienced with Selenium. So giving them a tool which works from their perspective exactly the same as Selenium turned out to, I think, make Appium quite popular. Plus the fact that it's all open source and all these good things that I think have attracted people and have caused, cloud, testing clouds like Headspin, where I work, or Sauce Labs, where Appium was initially developed when I was working there, or now Amazon or lots of other people build Appium into their products and services. So that all has gone pretty well. So the kind of last phase of this argument, I think, is that platforms, should actually take on the responsibility, not just of helping us figure out what the standard should be, going through a standards process, but also then creating their own implementations of whatever the ultimate standard is, which again, I hope to be based on the work that Appium has already been doing. I think this is also pretty obvious, but if you want a UI automation tool to work with iOS applications and Mac OS applications and iPad OS applications, the team that's going to do the best job at that is going to be the team that develops those platforms. It's going to be people at Apple who have access to internal code and knowledge about how the systems work and things like that. And likewise with Google and their platforms and etc. So right now it's the Appium team that's maintaining all of these implementations, but we're always one step behind changes from the vendors because we're not officially related to them in any way. So it's overall kind of less than optimal experience for our users because we're sort of an intermediate entity between them and the technologies that are ultimately at play. When they run into bugs, they report them to us, even though they're really bugs with, iOS or Android or whatever it is. And we have nothing we can't fix them. We have to tell them to go, send a radar into the void or whatever and hope that things get fixed the next time around. Anyway, for all the same reasons that it was important for browser vendors to create their own WebDriver implementations, I think the argument is the same that app platform vendors more generally should create their own, Appium implementations. It's just going to be better for everybody. And that means convincing platform vendors to do work, which, may be a hard sell. So that's part of, the argument that I want help making. I think it's important to point out that creating an Appium implementation doesn't mean replacing their existing work. It doesn't mean Apple getting rid of XUI test or Android getting rid of Espresso, for example. It could simply be a wrapper or an interface around those existing tools. And this would actually give platform vendors much greater usage of their underlying automation technologies that they're trying to promote. And that's more feedback for them on how these technologies are working, better bug reporting, and just overall more usage of their platform, which I think is a good thing for these different platforms. So that's kind of the argument. And so for this group, what I was hoping to kind of get is basically feedback. Do you think that this is something that we could go to Apple and Google and Microsoft and other vendors and make this argument, is now a good time for that. Another question is, assuming that goes well and a group is formed to work on this extension of the WebDriver protocol, where's the best place for that? The WebDriver protocol lives at the W3C. So that's kind of an obvious place, but I also learned that there's an OpenJS standards body that might be a good home given Appium's relationship with the OpenJS Foundation. I don't really know how to make those kinds of decisions, and I imagine this group does. Also, what's the right strategy for moving a proposal like this forward? I don't have relationships with folks at Apple and Google that decide these sorts of things, although I've tried over the years, but that's just not how the relationship between the open source project and these vendors has evolved. So I'm interested in thoughts and feedback on that this group has about that. So that's everything. Thanks for giving me some time, and I'm curious to hear any thoughts or happy to answer any questions or discuss as well.
Quiet clapping for the presentation. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Jonathan. I have opinions. I always have opinions. Y'all know that. So let me not share them first and see if Christian, who came, automatically, as soon as you started talking about WebDriver, it's like a beacon went off in his brain and he was like, oh, here I am.
Oh, nice. Hey, Christian.
Hey. Well, I actually have a question, and it's about the scope of that standard. I think, and I believe this is still the mission of Appium, is to be eventually being the driver of everything. And you have been talking particularly about mobile platforms, but we have the WebDriver is one automation standard that is implemented to W3C right now. There will be probably a superset for the mobile platform, but when we think about IoT and other platforms, how do we make the cuts there? How do we define the scopes there, and kind of at what end do we say, okay, this is so far this is what we want to have defined, and this is totally out of scope?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I have used mobile as kind of the examples because that's the most popular use of Appium right now. But you're right that kind of Appium's vision and how it's been developing has been to acknowledge that there are a lot of things that have user interfaces and user interactions that are not mobile devices. There's IoT, there's TV, there's car stuff, and all of these things want automation, right? So in terms of how a standard would look, I think the first question would be to sit down and look at kind of the existing platforms and ask, what does a sort of universal UI automation set of capabilities and interactions look like? Can we come up with something? So maybe that forms like a core, and it might be very similar to, it might just be the WebDriver standard. Maybe that's all we need for the core. I kind of think we probably need a few more things. But then if there's a kind of well-defined way to kind of push it in different directions for platforms which are a little more unique, like maybe there's a TV working group that is part of the same overall standards committee, what have you, but figures out what is unique about UI automation for TV platforms, like maybe the inclusion of a remote, for example, that it's not there in like an automation platform or a mobile automation platform. But I think the more we can define all of these things, the better. So again, I'm not a real standards veteran, so I don't know whether it's possible to kind of spike out of a main standard and have little add-ons that people also agree with. Maybe that's not a thing, but that would be my initial idea.
Mike Samuel.
This is not a space, so apologies if this is a silly question, but how much overlap is there between kind of the groups that are interested in this and the groups that are interested in standards work around CI/CD. It seems like running a lot of tests, headless and that kind of stuff is something that those folk care about. And I don't know, I'm not involved in cd.foundation, but I wonder whether or not there might be people there who have kind of takes on this and needs.
Yeah, that's a good question. It may be. My initial feeling is that they're kind of orthogonal in that, I'm talking right now about UI automation, which is almost, 99% of the time is used for testing. So there's like a direct link there, but the actual technologies are sort of agnostic about what you're trying to do with them. So somebody could use UI automation for testing, but they could also use it to, increase their score in a game, like an idle game or something like that. So they could use it for a completely different end than testing. And so UI automation as a standard, I'm wondering if it would be related to testing as a standard. I'm not sure if it's related or not, but certainly because in practice there's a lot of overlap, I'm sure it makes sense to talk to those folks and see.
They sometimes do have, luck, the people in the CI/CD space, on pushing people to, like if your stuff doesn't integrate with build tools and so on, then, you lose developer share. And so they may be able to kind of, herd people in the right direction.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
One of the questions that you asked is like around timing, like, is this the right kind of time to try and make a push for such a conversation? And I kind of wanted to weigh in on that and say that in my opinion, yes, that this does feel very timely. We've seen over the last couple of years a lot of maturity in just testing standards generally, like with WPT, with some other efforts, and there's getting to be a lot more say rigor and systems kind of built around the relationship between the developer community and the browser engineering community for testing. So my gut says yes, that this would be a conversation that certain teams would be keen to have, especially in 2022. And I wondered if other folks felt the same way. Christian, you clearly may weigh in on this too.
Yeah, I totally second that, because of the fact that at the browser testing and tools working group, they currently spec out the new WebDriver BiDi specification, which is almost a complete revamp of the existing protocol that we had so far. And if we have now conversations about what could be the most basic standard that other WebDriver in the browser space or Appium in the IoT mobile space could agree on and can be built on top on, that would be now the right place, because now everyone who's currently in the browser space working on that spec can still like say, okay, we can agree. We might now might be the best chance to agree on a common lowest level denominator for a spec for automation in general.
Cool.
And then in terms of like the forum, and kind of what role this group can play, obviously we're really excited, and maybe I say we, the royal we are really excited to see efforts to influence web standards being driven by our projects. Like that's a big part of like the goal of this particular working group, is to help facilitate that and make that a reality, because I think the projects here have a long history of doing that. We aren't ourselves a standards body, right? We don't create de jure, specifications here. But I think one thing that we could do is support a community specification development initiative, because there are now a lot of tools available to us through forums like the Joint Development Foundation and other places, to help bring like the developer community around a standard or a specification project, which has the same level of like royalty free commitments that you might find by spinning up, say, a community group at the W3C, or an interest group or something like that. But then you can take your time deciding and finding and shopping it to sort of like the best place for the de jure process to take hold, if that's something that wanted to occur. And I was thinking that that could be a great way to get started. I don't know how the folks here may feel about that, but that would be a path I would be excited about supporting. Or conversely, also, if you feel like W3C, if we feel like W3C is ultimately, for example, the right forum for a formal standard here, then we could support the creation of a community group at the W3C where we're members and all that kind of thing. I don't know what thoughts there the group might have for Jonathan. Strong opinions. Brian Cardell sometimes has strong opinions about this stuff.
Not this time.
No comments.
Cool. Yeah, no, those are valuable thoughts, and I don't know what it looks like to do the whatever you were talking about, the community process.
Yeah. There's some boilerplate stuff. It's basically just, the goal of that is to provide you a lightweight way of doing a governance process around a spec advancements. And then also it provides a community spec license, which again supports the goal of the ultimate product being something that's royalty free and usable.
Got it.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, I mean, I guess my initial feeling is, and maybe this is not an awesome thing to say to this group. I kind of care less about the forum and the process and more about, is everyone at the table who needs to be there? Because otherwise it kind of is a moot point. Like if the vendors aren't on board, then it kind of doesn't matter that there exists a standard if not everyone's adopting it. So I'm almost interested in wondering if is the order of operations, get buy-in and then see what forum will be most agreeable to the set of people who are going to need to implement the standard.
We have some folks on our board and in our community who are, I think, connected with the right teams or adjacent to the right teams at some of the vendors that you mentioned, who are going to kind of need to be bought into this in some way.
Yeah.
So one thing we can do is just help and should do is just start conversations with them. It is always helpful, though, if you can kind of point them to the shape of a plan. Like, we want to start working on this. It's going to look like, it's going to take the informal shape of, this other of why, and that at least gives them some way that they can start to imagine how their org or how their team might be able to participate in it. And that's helpful. So,
yeah, makes sense.
And to that end, I don't saying this out loud, I'm not sure that, an interest group, for example, at the W3C is would probably not be the best place to go excite, an Apple engineering manager to send their people to participate. This, no shade intended, but just saying that out loud. There's a signal.
Yep, cool. And that's what I know nothing about. So I appreciate the experience of those here to help with that.
So I wonder if we can, as the next step to help out here for Appium, maybe just make some intros. Or Mike's you got your hand up. Let me see what you have to say.
Oh, I just to the first question, what moves the needle for the big vendors? I wonder if maybe you mentioned this, but you talked about one of the things they're giving up is lock-in, and what are it's better to have a replacement in hand for something that you're taking away. So if you're saying we're going to take away the lock-in, what is it kind of explicitly that you're replacing that with? Right.
Yeah. And I think my thought on it right now, and tell me if we need something stronger. My thought is Appium has 5 to 10 times more users than their tools. Let's take that on assumption right now. It would need to be determined in some more accurate way. But say that you'll get all of these users that you don't have on your platform. This will make the applications on your platform better. Your users will be happier. You'll make more money, blah, blah, blah. So I do think that there is that direct line. So they would they would need to prioritize the ultimate kind of development velocity and quality of apps on their platform higher than tester lock-in, which I think is kind of a no-brainer, but maybe not. So, kind of in my experience in large orgs, a PM can manage to get promoted by saying that, hey, I grew our user community from 3,000 to 6,000, despite the fact that the overall user community in that segment grew from 10,000 to 50,000. Mm-hmm. As long as nobody else in the organization knows that has the context. Yeah. And so I think that may be coming out with those numbers and introducing those numbers into the discussion within the organization may be a good lever. Yeah. Cool.
Maybe also as an addition to that, the argument of the ecosystem would be valuable if you say, if we have a way to run Appium as a standard on Android or iOS, there's a whole bunch of tools that come with it that are, built by the Appium community or built by people that have been using Appium that can, leverage the phone in various ways that you cannot do with the native interfaces themselves. And there's just a lot more of tools that make the phone more accessible to various of use cases, right?
Yep, totally. Yep. I mean, I suppose from a business perspective, it also opens up the possibility of them actually, competing with a lot of cloud vendors, like the one I work for, which, maybe isn't good for my company, but if, let's just say, Apple and Google offered Appium as an implementation, they could easily offer Appium related services like they do for, with Firebase, or with the Xcode cloud stuff for XUI test, right? So there's potentially huge market opportunity for them there as well, which might be of interest.
So in our last few minutes, just kind of, again, thinking about how to help Appium and team, and also I think probably a few of us on this call who may be interested and to move forward. Maybe we can start with identifying some of the right teams we want to talk to, because I'm sure here amongst us we have connections to some of those people, and maybe we have a distro list for standards, so we can do that there. I think, Jonathan, I'll add you to the distro list,
Okay.
and so we can start that, and then I'll maybe also share in that thread links to the community spec boilerplate stuff if you want to check that out as an option for you to work.
Yep. No,
and use.
sounds, yeah, I'd like to learn more about that.
Cool. Yeah, and then we can kind of go from there and see how we can continue to support.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great. No, I really appreciate the opportunity to try and put some of these things into words and talk to some folks.
Groovy.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks, Jonathan, for the presentation.
Thanks,
Thank
Jonathan.
you.
We've got a few short minutes before our call is done. So certainly not long enough to have a meaty discussion about any of this, but I just am too excited to not share it with you all today. After a long wait, we've got a couple of different designs back from the LF Creative Services team for our spec education site, which we have been calling WIST for Wisdom in Standards and Technology, kind of playing off of that idea of like growing and helping people like learn and grow and expand. So Wisteria was sort of like this, plant, kind of speaking to the growth and also speaking to sort of wisdom. And so anyway, I'll share these with you really quickly. I'll also share them in Slack and stuff so you can look at them more deeply later. But several different cool concepts here, some that include the whole site kind of name spelled out, different treatments sort of with background texture, different types of like font styles ranging from stuff that looks a little bit more like formal, I suppose, and others that look a little bit less so, maybe a little bit more wistful, I suppose. There you go. Hey. Some of this, like this one down here at the bottom here with 1B with the fonts kind of like this, to me reminded me a lot of kind of what the WPT team did for theirs, which I like in a way. But, lots of different concepts. What we need to do as the next step with this is spend some time like thinking about it. What are you responding well to? What do you like? What do you not like? And we can get back to the creative services team, maybe with some concrete feedback about styling, which pieces are kind of hitting home for us and which pieces aren't. But once we kind of get this shored up, then we can convert our very boring static site into something that's pretty. So
these ones are really cool.
you'd like these with the book?
I do. My first, I don't know, we don't really have time, but my first thinking is like the first ones with the stuff over it. It looks, if you're not sure what wisteria and stuff is, it just sort of looks messy. But these bottom ones and these ones where it's above it more, I think feel better to me. But anyway, we don't have time to discuss them.
Yeah, that's a good point. This kind of look like rain or whatever. But I was very excited to see it, and I look forward to everybody's comments on it. And again, I'll pop this in Slack for us. So
Cool.
Yeah,
thank you. They look great.
Yeah, cool. Yes, it all looks pretty. And I
So
like,
those are-
I can't wait for the site to be pretty.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I
Pretty
heard that
cool,
last year.
exactly. So yeah, so that's the update here. And I guess with that, we're pretty much out of time. Any final parting thoughts today? Nope. Okay. All right, party people. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, you too, Jory.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Stop share. Let's see. Go off of YouTube. How do we end
I
YouTube?
need to do that.